Abhimanyu Mishra has just become the youngest grandmaster in the world at the age of 12 years, 4 months and 25 days. He beats the previous record that has lasted for 19 years of Sergei Karyakin, who was a very elderly 12 years and 7 months. So anyway, coming back to Abhi Mishra, he was born and bred in New Jersey in the United States. As is suggested by his name, his parents are of Indian origin. And he's obviously worked incredibly hard. In an interview after the game where he won, he said that he works for about 12 hours a day on chess. He cannot get enough of it. And he's obviously encouraged greatly by his parents. They made great sacrifices in order to bring him to Hungary, where he's been living and playing for the past few months. He was there with his father. They bought one-way tickets to Budapest and basically said, we're not leaving here until Abhi gets his grandmaster title. And over the last few months, he's been playing in regular tournaments, building up his rating, and now he's achieved his third norm. Splendid achievement. And, well, what I wanted to do was show you actually not the game that clinched the title, but another game of his from a couple of months ago in Budapest. But I thought this was a really attractive game. Looking at his style, I can see that he has very good opening knowledge. You can see he works really hard at that. But also a lot of his games are actually quite long. He's not afraid of endgames at all. And, you know, he doesn't fit the mould of, you know, a typical prodigy winning games quickly with sort of tactical thrusts. It's not like that at all. So, you know, he seems to be quite a well-rounded player. So let's have a look at this one. So he's playing black against Levente Pap, who is a Hungarian player, decent Hungarian player, also pretty young. Not that young, I think he's about 20 years old. So Abhi Mishra playing black, and we've transposed into a fairly regular English. You could say this is the Botvinnik system with pawns on e4 and c4. And white just closing things down for the time being. e5. That's interesting. You know, a lot of players might think of playing e6 here, but he's just content to block the position in the middle. So apart from the queenside pawn moves, actually symmetrical so far. And knight d5, d6. You know, I think that's interesting itself. You know, he's prepared to graft away at a position. But the position now breaks open with f4. White is going for it. But this is a nice reaction. Doesn't panic, simply takes on f4. Now, white has quite a choice. If pawn takes, then black has a couple of options. f5 certainly doesn't look bad to blockade this pawn. Another option is to take here and play the knight into d4, and the queen can emerge on h4, and certainly black, I think, would get pretty good counterplay in that kind of position. You know, this centre isn't necessarily going anywhere. In any case, white played knight e takes f4, but that means that black can use not just the d4 square, but the e5 square as well. Bishop e6. So black would very much like to exchange everything here and then plant a knight on d4 or e5. And then, well, it just looks like black has wonderful control over those dart squares. So white took on e6. Now the knight has to move away or exchange. So you can see that white is obviously trying to put some pressure on this pawn here. So knight d4 covers the pawn. Bishop h3, still trying to open things up. And if e5, then yeah, knight e6. You can see that white has conquered, well, that, at least this diagonal, which is quite pleasant. But of course, it's not necessary to play e5. Why would you want to close off this bishop? And instead, Abi plays rook f6 to guard that pawn. Bishop e3. I think white would very much like to exchange here if black has to recapture the pawn. Well, in any case, threatening the knight threatens the pawn here, but that knight can be supported, knight ec6. So black still has control over these dark squares. Rook f2 and queen e7. That just lends a little bit more protection to the pawn on e6. And now basically white is running out of ideas. He hasn't been able to provoke that e-pawn to move to advance. So, well, what next actually? It's really hard to find a plan here. Whereas in the meantime, black is building up very nicely. Rook f8. Now h4. Not quite sure what that's doing. Bishop h6. Yeah, this is nice. Now Abi comes up with a very nice plan. Bishop h6. And here king h1 was played. It's really quite a difficult position for white actually. Very unpleasant fighting against these two knights in the middle. White played king h1. Okay. What would you play now with black? What did Abi play in this position? I really like what happens next, actually. Basically, he continues his conquest over the dark squares by sacrificing an exchange. So white can capture this in three different ways. Let's see. Pawn takes. If pawn takes, queen check. And now a really, really stylish move. This didn't happen, but let's take a look anyway. Knight e5. Threatening knight g4, hitting everything, and queen h2 as well. And of course, if pawn takes knight, bishop takes with a deadly pin. Okay, what about bishop takes? Then we've got bishop takes here, queen takes check. And once again, this move, knight e5, pin and win. Can't be taken because of queen takes rook, and in any case, knight g4 is coming. Those knights just totally restrict white's pieces. Such beautiful pieces. Okay, so let's go back. So rook takes f4 just played, and white played rook takes, bishop takes. So this is actually very similar. And now again an exchange sacrifice, and queen takes pawn check. King steps here. This is the game continuation. Queen takes pawn. So now black has, let me see. All I can see are dominating black pieces, but actually white is the exchange up. But obviously black has two pawns as well. But the crucial thing is total control over these dark squares. b3, well, that is very much a forlorn hope. Knight e5. Bringing the knight in. Rook a2. Okay, that was the point of b3, to try and swing the rook across. And queen g3. That was the final move of the game, where you can see that white's position is just falling apart. So many threats here. We've got moves like knight hit or knight g4, knight takes d3, and knight f4 are coming. And basically, white cannot touch that queen at all. You can't offer a trade. I mean, it's actually a very, very simple win in this position. Absolutely crushing. So I just thought that was a really beautiful position. That's the kind of position you absolutely dream of in these kind of positions when you're conquering those dark squares. So once again, I wish Abhi Mishra all the best and congratulations on becoming the youngest grandmaster in the world. We'll have to see what happens to him in the future.